The crisp air of an autumn evening in Denver, 1993, carried the scent of pine and impending snow, a silent, chilling prelude to the long, unforgiving winter ahead. It was a Tuesday, a day of the week typically devoid of grand events, a seemingly unremarkable night in the bustling, yet still somewhat intimate, city nestled majestically against the towering Rockies. But for the Miller family, for Sarah, Emily, and Mark, it would become the night their world fractured irrevocably, a terrifying void opening that would swallow not just a man, but the very fabric of their carefully constructed, loving lives. David Miller, a devoted husband, a dedicated father of two, stepped out for what he claimed was a quick, late-night errand, a work call that simply couldn't wait. He never came back. For 11 agonizing, hope-draining years, his absence was a gaping, festering wound, a silence louder than any scream, a constant, low thrum of dread. Then, in late 2004, the unbearable silence finally broke, a chilling revelation emerging from the remote, untouched vastness of the Colorado wilderness. But the answers it offered, delivered with such brutal finality, were far from a resolution. Instead, they deepened the mystery, casting a longer, colder shadow. This is the harrowing story of David Miller, a life abruptly and violently ended, and the enduring, heart-wrenching mystery that emerged from the stoic shadow of the mountains more than a decade after he vanished from his home, leaving behind only questions and an immeasurable sorrow. To truly grasp the profound and lasting impact of David Miller's inexplicable disappearance, we must first understand the man himself and the specific world he inhabited in 1993. David, at 34 years old, was the epitome of the American everyman of his era, a steadfast, dependable backbone for his family, a respected, if somewhat reserved, project manager at a mid-sized construction firm with its bustling offices nestled amidst the brick and glass canyons of downtown Denver. His days were a rhythmic, predictable cycle of project deadlines, intricate blueprints spread across his large desk, and frequent, necessary site visits in his reliable, if slightly worn and ever dusty, 1989 Ford Taurus. The city of Denver in the early 90s was a place in the throes of growth and transition, yet it still clung tightly to a comfortable, unpretentious charm. Lower Downtown, or Lodoo as it was affectionately known, was just embarking on its ambitious revitalization, but much of the city retained a slower, more connected pace, with information primarily disseminated through local newspapers, evening news broadcasts on bulky television sets, and the familiar, comforting hum of landline telephones. Pagers were considered cutting-edge communication for professionals, and the internet was a nascent, mostly academic concept, light years away from the ubiquitous, instant presence it would soon become. David's world was intensely tactile and tangible. The raw, earthy smell of sawdust from a new construction site, the rough texture of heavy-duty paper plans, the firm, trustworthy handshake of a client after a deal was sealed. He wasn't chasing exorbitant fortunes or fleeting fame, but he was comfortably well off, providing a solid, stable, and loving life for his wife, Sarah, and their two bright-eyed, endlessly curious children. Emily, just 8 years old, was a remarkably imaginative and sensitive girl, already showing a nascent knack for storytelling and an insatiable appetite for books. Mark, a spirited 6, was a whirlwind of boundless energy, utterly obsessed with miniature toy cars and the grand, epic adventures he concocted in their backyard. Their modest but well-kept two-story home in the Green Valley Ranch neighborhood, a relatively newer development on the blossoming northeast side of the city, echoed constantly with their joyous laughter, the comforting clatter of dinner plates during family meals, and the soothing, patient cadence of David's voice as he read bedtime stories, his baritone a warm, familiar balm after a long day's work. Sarah, who worked part-time as a librarian at a branch library not far from their home, cherished these mundane, yet profoundly powerful, moments, these small, daily anchors of their cherished existence. David was a creature of habit, meticulous with his schedule, dependable to a fault. He lived and breathed Broncos football, good-naturedly tolerated Sarah's eclectic, often surprising taste in country music, and absolutely lived for weekend hikes in the nearby foothills of the Rockies, often taking Emily and Mark along, patiently pointing out constellations as dusk gently settled over the rugged, breathtaking landscape. His biggest worries were the occasional, petty office politics, and the ever-present question of whether he'd saved enough money for that eagerly anticipated family vacation to Yellowstone next summer. Life, though busy and sometimes presenting its fair share of challenges, felt undeniably secure, delightfully predictable, and filled with the vibrant, tangible promise of a bright tomorrow. The future in their quiet, comfortable corner of Denver seemed boundless, unblemished, and utterly within reach. October 26, 1993, dawned like any other Tuesday. David woke before the sun had fully breached the eastern horizon, his internal clock, honed by years of routine, nudging him awake. He pressed a soft kiss to Sarah's forehead, shared a quick, customary breakfast with the children, and then, after the usual morning rush, dropped Emily and Mark off at their elementary school before heading into his downtown office. He called Sarah around 6 p.m., his voice a little tired but otherwise normal, saying he might be home late. A client meeting had run over unexpectedly, and there was a minor but urgent issue at a construction site near Stapleton International Airport that needed his personal oversight before it could escalate. "Shouldn't be too long, honey," he promised reassuringly, a phrase Sarah would replay in her mind countless times in the years to come, dissecting every syllable for a hidden meaning. Sarah made dinner, helped the kids diligently with their homework, and then tucked them into bed, their youthful chatter slowly fading into sleepy murmurs, replaced by the gentle hush of the evening. By 9 p.m., David still hadn't arrived home. She wasn't overly concerned yet. Late nights were an occasional, accepted part of his demanding line of work. But by 11 p.m., a persistent, unsettling flicker of unease began to stir deep within her gut, a cold premonition she couldn't shake. She tried his pager, then his office number, leaving increasingly frantic messages on an answering machine that clicked and whirred, its mechanical voice sounding eerily desolate, each unanswered call amplifying her growing anxiety. No response. The silence of their once lively house grew heavy, oppressive, amplified by the rhythmic, relentless ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, each tick echoing her mounting fear. Midnight came and went, marking the shift into a new, terrifying day. Sarah, now undeniably consumed by a raw, primal worry, started calling friends, then family members, her voice cracking with each desperate inquiry. No one had seen David since that morning. No one had received a call or a page from him. By 3 a.m., a full-blown panic, cold and sharp as a Denver winter's blade, had fully set in, gripping her heart. She finally called the Denver Police Department, her voice thin with fear, trembling uncontrollably as she stammered, "My husband's missing. He didn't come home." The dispatcher's tone was calm, almost infuriatingly routine, a voice accustomed to the late-night anxieties and everyday dramas of a big city. "He's probably just out with friends, ma'am. Give it 24 hours. Sarah, however, knew with the unshakable, visceral certainty of a wife and mother, a certainty born of shared life and intimate knowledge, that this was profoundly different. David wasn't out with friends without calling. He wasn't that kind of man. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a terrifying, all-consuming nightmare beginning to unfurl with horrifying precision, threatening to consume them all. The 24 hours the dispatcher had so casually suggested stretched into an unbearable 48, then a week, then a month, and then a seemingly endless, desolate succession of months that blurred into years. David Miller's disappearance was officially categorized as a missing person case, but without the immediate presence of a clear crime scene or a body, the initial investigative efforts felt disjointed, a frustrating, bureaucratic dance between desperate, fleeting hope and crushing, inevitable despair. Detective Mark Jenkins, a seasoned but visibly weary officer from Denver PD's Major Crimes Unit, a man whose face was etched with the profound weariness that comes from witnessing too much of the darker side of life, was assigned the monumental task. He interviewed Sarah repeatedly, each session probing deeper, trying to unearth any hidden secret, any unspoken enemy, any plausible reason why a stable, family-oriented man would simply vanish without a trace from the very heart of his life. Coworkers described David as diligently dedicated, a little reserved, intensely focused on his work, with no known grudges or significant conflicts that could explain such an abrupt departure. Financial records were meticulously clean, no hidden debts, no secret accounts, no suspicious withdrawals. His friends universally confirmed his reliable nature, his unwavering devotion to his family, his predictable habits, reinforcing the image of a man utterly unlikely to simply walk away. The police meticulously canvassed the Green Valley Ranch neighborhood, knocking on countless doors, asking if anyone had witnessed anything unusual, any out-of-place activity, on the night of October 26th. A few vague recollections surfaced: a dark sedan seen idling suspiciously near the Miller home, a car that didn't seem to belong, an unfamiliar figure briefly glimpsed, but nothing concrete, nothing that could be definitively pursued or linked to David. Every single lead felt like a phantom, dissipating into thin air upon closer inspection, leaving behind only frustration. The absence of his car, the distinct 1989 Ford Taurus, was a particularly vexing and baffling detail. It was his primary mode of transport, an extension of his daily routine, and without it, the mystery deepened into an impenetrable fog. Weeks later, after extensive ground and aerial searches across the Denver metro area that had yielded absolutely nothing, David's Taurus was finally found. It was abandoned in a long-term parking lot at Stapleton International Airport, ironically, not far from where he'd claimed to be working that fateful night. The car was found locked, with no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no obvious damage. His work briefcase, containing routine work documents and his daily planner, was still inside, seemingly undisturbed. His wallet, however, was conspicuously gone. Police painstakingly processed the entire vehicle, searching for any forensic evidence, a stray hair, a smudge of dirt, a latent print. No blood, no fingerprints beyond David's own, nothing whatsoever to indicate a struggle or a violent altercation. It was almost too clean, too deliberately placed, suggesting a calculated, premeditated move, rather than a spontaneous act of violence or a frantic escape. Was it a diversion, a cunning red herring designed to mislead investigators, or had he genuinely intended to fly somewhere, only to be intercepted? Airlines had no record of David Miller flying out of Stapleton or any other regional airport in the vicinity at that time. The car's discovery, initially a flicker of hope, only deepened the profound mystery, offering a tantalizing clue that ultimately led nowhere, a desolate dead-end sign in the middle of a vast, empty landscape of agonizing, unanswered questions. Sarah's initial surge of relief at the car's finding quickly transmuted into a colder, harder, more suffocating despair. For Sarah, the crushing absence of David became a relentless physical weight, a constant, unbearable pressure on her chest, making every breath an effort. Every morning she woke with a sharp jolt, her mind still momentarily clouded by the fleeting mercy of sleep, instinctively reaching out for David beside her, only to be met by the cold, stark reality of an empty bed, the lingering, phantom scent of his pillow a cruel, almost unbearable reminder of his missing presence. Emily and Mark struggled immensely, their young minds grappling with a concept too vast, too cruel, too utterly incomprehensible for children. "When is Daddy coming home?" Mark would ask, his voice small, reedy, clutching his favorite toy car tightly, his eyes wide with an innocence that Sarah couldn't bring herself to shatter with the brutal, unspeakable truth she herself couldn't comprehend. Emily, older and far more perceptive, retreated deeply into herself, her once bright, effervescent spirit visibly dimmed, her grades slowly but steadily slipping as her focus fractured under the immense emotional strain. Sarah, in a desperate attempt to protect her children, tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, a steady, predictable routine that might offer some comfort. But grief was a constant, unwelcome companion, a heavy, suffocating shadow stretching across every corner of their lives, darkening even the brightest moments. The financial strain on Sarah and her children was immense, almost insurmountable. David's life insurance policy, like many at the time, had a common but profoundly cruel missing person clause that meant no payout for 7 excruciating years, a legal declaration of death often required to access much-needed funds, adding a bureaucratic, dehumanizing layer to their already agonizing emotional torment. Sarah, already working part-time, took on every conceivable extra hour at the library, picking up evening and weekend shifts, exhausting herself physically and emotionally, but it barely covered the mortgage payments and the ever-mounting bills. Neighbors and church members rallied initially, bringing countless meals, offering invaluable childcare, providing an essential outpouring of immediate support and comfort. But as weeks turned into months and months inexorably into years, the immediate outpouring of sympathy and practical help slowly but surely faded, replaced by sympathetic, pitying glances, hushed whispers, and the insidious, corrosive spread of local theories and conjectures. Some wondered aloud if David had simply run off, escaping responsibilities or a secret life, a common, often unfair, and deeply hurtful assumption in missing person cases that places an additional, undeserved burden on the grieving family. Sarah fiercely defended him, battling against the cruel whispers, but the insidious doubt, like a persistent, parasitic weed, began to take tentative root in the hidden corners of her own mind, a corrosive acid slowly eating at her certainty, adding another layer of torment to her already impossibly heavy burden of sorrow and uncertainty. Detective Jenkins, despite his increasing weariness, revisited the burgeoning case files countless times in the ensuing years, each yellowing page a silent testament to their frustrating lack of progress, a grim, detailed record of unanswered questions and elusive clues. The early 90s, while not entirely devoid of forensic science, simply did not possess the widespread use of DNA forensics for missing persons on the sophisticated scale we know and rely upon today. Computer databases were rudimentary, disjointed, and often incompatible between agencies. National missing person networks were less robust, communication between law enforcement bodies slower and more fragmented, often relying on faxes and phone calls rather than instant digital sharing. Fingerprint analysis was standard procedure, but without a viable suspect print to match, it led nowhere. The critical golden hour, the precious time immediately following a crime, had long passed into oblivion, then the golden days, and now an entire golden decade had slipped by, each passing year dulling the edges of potential leads, eroding the memories of crucial witnesses, and making a resolution seem increasingly impossible, fading into the realm of distant hopes. The initial flurry of investigative activity dwindled steadily to periodic checks, obligatory re-interviews of key people who inevitably had nothing new or substantial to add, and the occasional speculative, often melancholic, discussion among cold case detectives during their breaks. The case went cold officially, relegated to a steel cabinet in the archives, a fading photograph of David Miller with his hopeful, pre-disappearance smile slowly curling at the edges on the corkboard of Unsolved Mysteries in the Major Crimes Unit, a stark reminder of a life interrupted. Sarah became a familiar, heartbreakingly persistent, almost spectral face at the police station, her initial, fragile hope slowly, painfully replaced by a grim, unwavering determination that refused to be extinguished. She wrote countless eloquent letters to elected officials, made endless, pleading phone calls to local news outlets, spoke bravely to local reporters on the agonizing anniversary of his disappearance year after year, her plea always the same, a poignant echo across the city. Someone knows something, please help us bring David home. Please help us find some peace, some closure, some end to this unbearable torment. 11 long, agonizing years peeled away like layers of old, brittle paint, each one leaving behind a deeper, more entrenched patina of sorrow, of unresolved grief, of an ever-present, haunting array of unanswered questions. Emily was now 19, a freshman bravely navigating her way through the complex world of the University of Colorado Boulder, her youthful vibrancy subtly muted, still haunted by her father's ghost, a constant, low-level thrum of anxiety and unresolved trauma beneath her composed surface. Mark, 17, channeled his deep-seated grief and simmering anger into sports, becoming a quiet, brooding, intensely focused teenager who rarely spoke of his father, his emotions bottled up tightly, his anger simmering just beneath a veneer of outward calm. Sarah had learned through sheer force of will to live with the void, not to accept it, but to navigate her daily life around its crushing, omnipresent emptiness. The empty chair at the dinner table was a permanent, poignant fixture, a constant, aching reminder of what had been lost. Then, on a crisp morning in late September 2004, the phone rang, a jarring intrusion into the accustomed silence. It was Detective Jenkins, his voice uncharacteristically tense, his usual world weariness replaced by a raw, urgent energy that instantly put Sarah on edge. "Sarah," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, we may have something, it's what you've been waiting for." Hope, a fragile, long-dormant thing Sarah barely recognized, tentatively stirred within her chest, a delicate, almost painful flutter in her heart, instantly warring with a surge of terror. The something was grim, a discovery that brought with it a macabre, brutal form of finality. Far up in the rugged, pine-dense slopes of the Pike National Forest, approximately 50 miles southwest of Denver, deep within the profound solitude of the vast Colorado wilderness, a group of off-trail hikers had stumbled upon a scene straight out of a nightmare, a horrifying tableau left untouched by human hands for over a decade. They were exploring a rarely frequented area known for its old, defunct mining operations, near an ancient, crumbling shack that had long been hidden by years of aggressive overgrowth, gradually reclaimed by the relentless forces of nature. There, scattered amidst the fallen leaves, pine needles, and underbrush partially covered by debris and earth, they discovered what were undeniably human remains. Skeletal fragments, bleached stark white by the relentless sun and wind, scattered by the passage of time and the scavenging of local wildlife. Amidst the scattered bones, remarkably preserved by the dry, high-altitude air of the mountains, were remnants of clothing. A tattered, faded blue button-down shirt, khaki pants, now little more than decaying fabric, testament to the passage of time. and crucially, miraculously, still affixed to a finger bone, a gold wedding band worn smooth by years of wear, its inscription still faintly legible with the date 10-15-85. David and Sarah's wedding anniversary. A date etched forever in Sarah's heart, now a chilling, irrefutable marker of a brutal, violent end. The grim scene in the Pike National Forest was immediately secured, a wide perimeter established, transforming the once serene mountain landscape into a meticulous, almost reverent archaeological excavation site. Teams from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, CBI, and Denver PD Forensics Unit, armed with vastly improved techniques and technologies compared to 1993, meticulously collected every shard of bone, every minute shred of fabric, every piece of organic matter, sifting through the earth with painstaking, agonizing care. Dental records, which Sarah had painstakingly provided years ago, offered the first definitive match, confirming what the presence of the wedding band had already hinted at with such chilling certainty. Then a comprehensive DNA profile, successfully extracted from a femur bone, confirmed it with absolute, undeniable certainty. The remains belonged, without a shadow of a doubt, to David Miller. The devoted father of two, who had vanished into the bustling Denver night 11 long years prior, had finally been found. Not in some distant, anonymous city, not in a new, secret life, but in the desolate, quiet majesty of the Rocky Mountains, his final resting place, a forgotten, unmarked grave, hidden in terrifying plain sight, a secret held by the silent peaks. Detective Jenkins, now older, grayer, his face showing the cumulative toll of years on the force, but with a renewed resolve that belied his profound weariness, officially reopened the cold case, breathing new, albeit somber, life into it. The discovery, while horrific, offered a macabre form of final closure for Sarah and her children. David was dead. The agonizing, soul-crushing uncertainty of his ultimate fate was finally, definitively over. But the how and the why of his death remained agonizingly elusive, only deepening the pain, replacing one form of torment with another. The medical examiner meticulously determined the cause of death to be consistent with blunt force trauma to the skull, a powerful, fatal blow to the head, though the exact weapon used was impossible to identify given the advanced state of decomposition and the scattered nature of the remains. It was unequivocally a homicide, a violent, premeditated act that had ended a precious life and shattered a family, leaving behind an indelible scar. The reopened investigation, despite the fresh momentum and the advent of newer forensic technologies, faced an immediate and formidable uphill battle, a daunting challenge for even the most experienced detectives. 11 years had not only meticulously erased countless potential clues from the original crime scene, where David was actually abducted or murdered, but had also allowed nature to reclaim much of the evidence at the discovery site itself. The environment itself had been a silent, unwitting accomplice to the crime, with wind and weather scattering minute particles, animals disturbing skeletal remains, and the relentless passage of time obscuring everything, turning once vital evidence into dust. While forensic technology had advanced significantly by 2004, offering more sensitive DNA analysis and better trace evidence collection, the original crime scene, the exact place where David was abducted or murdered, had long since vanished, likely cleaned meticulously by the perpetrator or simply erased by the elements. Witnesses from 1993 had understandably moved away from Denver, their memories faded into unreliable, fragmented recollections. Or worse, some were no longer alive to provide crucial testimony, taking potential secrets with them to their own graves. The geographical location of the remains, so far from Denver and David's last known movements, strongly suggested the killer had deliberately chosen a remote, isolated, and rarely visited spot, banking on the vast, unforgiving wilderness to hide their dark secret forever, a perfect natural shroud. Police tirelessly revisited David's former associates, painstakingly re-examined his financial dealings, delved into any old conflicts or grudges, every minute aspect of his life. Was there something crucial missed in 1993? A disgruntled employee, a shady business partner from a past project that went south? Theories abounded, circulating through the police department, but concrete, actionable evidence remained stubbornly scarce. They explored the possibility of a random act of violence, a tragic carjacking or a robbery gone wrong, but the careful, deliberate disposal of the body in such a remote location suggested planning, a personal motive rather than a spur-of-the-moment crime. The absence of his wallet in the abandoned car, yet the miraculous presence of his precious gold wedding ring still affixed to his skeletal finger, was a particularly puzzling and infuriating contradiction. If it was a robbery gone wrong, why would the killer take the wallet, a comparatively trivial item, but leave such a sentimental and easily pawnable piece of jewelry? Or was the wallet taken as a deliberate misdirection, a cunning ploy to make it appear like a robbery, when the true motive was far more sinister, far more personal, and deeply rooted in David's life? Every new piece of information, every tantalizing clue that emerged, seemed only to deepen the intricate layers of the mystery, creating more questions than it provided answers, pushing resolution further out of reach. The agonizing years that followed the grim, undeniable discovery brought no arrests, no charges, and ultimately, no justice for David Miller. Sarah, Emily, and Mark found themselves trapped in a new kind of limbo, a different but equally painful state of unresolved grief. The agonizing not knowing of his ultimate fate, a decade-long torment, was replaced by the equally agonizing not knowing of his killer's identity and their twisted motive. The tragic news of David's death and the subsequent failure to identify his killer resonated deeply and unsettlingly within the Denver community, casting a pall over its sense of security. It was a stark, brutal reminder of the inherent fragility of human life, the insidious nature of unresolved evil, and the haunting, persistent grip of cold cases that defy resolution. For Sarah, the confirmation of David's remains offered a profound, if deeply painful, shift in her grieving process. She could, at long last, truly grieve. She could finally visit a grave, a tangible, sacred place to remember him, to feel his presence, to say her final, aching goodbyes. The physical act of burial, of laying him to rest, brought a small, fragile measure of peace, a crucial step forward in a decade-long stagnation of soul-crushing sorrow. Emily and Mark, now navigating the complexities of early adulthood, were left to grapple with the double burden of their father's violent, sudden, and senseless end, and the enduring injustice of an unsolved murder that left them with no answers. They had gone from innocent children waiting patiently for their father to come home, to grown adults forced to live with the chilling, brutal knowledge that he was taken from them, brutally and inexplicably, and that his killer walked free, unpunished, perhaps even living among them. The haunting story of David Miller thus became a solemn, cautionary tale, a tenacious cold case that continued to haunt the corridors of the Denver Police Department, a stark, painful testament to the deep, dark shadows that linger menacingly in even the sunniest, most picturesque of Colorado landscapes. His restless spirit, forever tied to the windswept peaks and silent valleys where his remains were found, continues to whisper a chilling, unanswered question into the thin, rarefied mountain air. Who did this and why? His children, now building families of their own, still carry the immense, crushing weight of that unanswered question, the flickering, desperate hope for justice, a tiny, persistent flame in the vast, cold darkness of their father's unsolved murder. The majestic mountains, silent and stoic, hold their secrets close, and for David Miller, the full, terrifying truth of his disappearance and brutal death remains, to this day, buried beneath the ancient pines, a heartbreaking testament to an enduring, deeply unsettling mystery that refuses to yield its secrets.